Have you ever wondered why some boxers can take punches while others shut down instantaneously? Well, being caught on the chin can be a death sentence in boxing. With the head swiftly rotating and the brain slamming against the skull, it's a recipe for a KO, or perhaps even worse. So why can boxers like Triple G, Marvin Hagler or George Chuvalo remain standing, often unfazed by the strike? Yet fighters like Amir Khan, David Price and Bruce Seldon crumple to the canvas. So let's explore the strength of fighters' chins from each country, rating them out of 10. There will obviously be variety, so I'm going to determine the average level of resilience. But first off, what components make a granite chin? Please leave a like for the algorithm. There's three main pillars to examine here, namely genetic predisposition, physical characteristics, and willpower. Firstly, there seems to be something innate in someone's ability to take a punch. The renowned Triple G was known for having a granite chin, with him stating, "Thanks to my parents and God, I don't feel my opponent's power." Wayne McCullough, a Northern Irish boxer who stood toe-to-toe with Morales and Zaragoza, believes that you are either born with a good chin or you're not, pointing to his skinny neck and smaller legs as proof that it is inherent. Now, I'd personally say there is merit in this. AJ Liebling always highlighted Rocky Marciano's ability to stomach a blistering punch, but there are other factors at play. So genetic predisposition accounts for 40% of a person's chin, I'd say. Barry Jordan, a ringside doctor, notes, "Fighters who tend to have rugged chins are sometimes those with thicker skulls and necks." George Chuvalo, a heavyweight boxer with an iron chin, echoed such sentiment.
And I try to analyze it. One of the reasons is I have a very short neck. When you have a short neck, that works to your advantage. Why? If I had a neck like a stack of dimes, and I get hit with a punch, my brain would be more liable to reverberate more. I think I still have a pretty thick neck, but when I was younger, I had a thicker neck. I used to work a lot at developing my neck muscles, my whole shoulder girdle.
A solid example of the importance of a shorter, stockier neck can be traced to the Klitschko brothers. The elder Vitali's neck is better suited to absorb impact, while Vladimir's is longer and thinner generally. Vitali was never knocked down in his 257 amateur and pro fights. Meanwhile, Vladimir's chin was scrutinized heavily, particularly after Corey Sanders and Layman Brewster. Upon reading about Eubank Sr., I learned that, having his head x-rayed, they found his jaw to be incredibly thick and therefore durable.
My neck exercises. I used to also chew a lot of bubble gum. Double bubble or whatever. I used to have protruding jaw muscles when I was younger, not so much when I'm older.
By boasting a thicker, wider jaw and skull generally, the force of impact can be distributed over a larger area, perhaps making a knockout less likely. The unfortunate death of Welsh boxer Johnny Owen in 1980 sadly reinforced this, due to him having an abnormally thin skull according to medical reports. Consequently, I believe the neck and jaw thickness make up for about 30% of the chin's durability. When examining the impact of strong legs and a solid core upon a fighter's chin, there's few actual scientific studies. Boxers like Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield both had muscle packed onto their legs and just so happened to possess sturdy chins. Yet Anthony Joshua, who boasts perhaps the biggest legs in boxing, had his chin checked on many an occasion. I therefore feel, aside from being an element which can absorb some of the punch, the legs and core probably accounts for only 15%. Wayne McCullough interestingly suggests that when a boxer is hit, their brain offers them a chance to either go down or stay up. I'm not entirely convinced by this. I do believe mental fortitude and grit likely could have a bearing upon whether a person can rise from the canvas, but if you watch a lights out KO, it can happen to even the most mentally tough practitioners, especially if that fighter is depleted and not in optimal shape. If a boxer has been involved in a strict weight cut, the brain is ultimately deprived of its water stores, shrinking and leaving it more vulnerable to trauma, regardless of resolve. Yet, if biting down on your gum shield, keeping your chin tucked, and sticking to your game plan constitutes willpower, then this can certainly strengthen and safeguard the boxer's faculties. Hence, let's say that willpower accounts for about 15% overall. I could honestly debate this topic for hours, but essentially those are what dictate a strong chin. So now let's examine the track records of each country. With Russia, there's a smaller subset of fighters to analyse. Before the USSR's collapse in December 1991, Russian boxers weren't allowed to turn professional, solely competing in the Olympics, where the gloves tended to be heavier and therefore less conducive to knockouts. But through examining top Russian fighters like Bivol, who has never been officially knocked down in his professional career, and Beterbiev, who has only been dropped twice before then going on to win, it's safe to say there's an aura of solidity surrounding Russian chins. This is reinforced by the heavyweight Nikolai Valuev, who, although cracked by David Haye emphatically, withstood sizable shots throughout much of his career. Dmitry Pirog was never dropped, ending his career 20-0, and Kovalev, despite not possessing an uncrackable chin, still took tough shots consistently. Going back even further, Kostya Tszyu was deemed incredibly hard to drop, only falling to the hands of Ricky Hatton. Therefore, I'd say the Russians have solid chins, achieving an 8 out of 10 on the scale. A country synonymous with producing extremely tough practitioners is of course Mexico. Considering their brawling style leads to substantial risk of being caught flush on the chin, Mexican fighters tend to be effective at not being wobbled or shaken very often. Julio Cesar Chavez was only knocked down for the first time in his 91st fight against Frankie Randall, and showcased an insane chin against opponents like Meldrick Taylor and Pernell Whitaker. Rafael Garcia's article in the Fight City rightly notes Mexican boxers as a distinct breed, never shying away from proving the quality of their exceptional chins. Examining its top fighters like Salvador Sanchez and Ricardo Lopez, this synopsis rings true as they frequently engage in scraps, often coming out unscathed. Now, there may be an argument that Mexicans' chins aren't as savagely tested due to them mainly inhabiting the lower weight divisions, yet the few heavyweights and cruiserweights they do have, notably Andy Ruiz and Gilberto Ramirez, tend to still be pretty durable. Consequently, I'd argue that Mexicans naturally boast exceptional chins, with even their less skilled boxers often showcasing an ability to swallow hard punches. I'd award them a 9 out of 10 overall. Next we have Great Britain. This is a trickier one to determine. Donald McRae in The Dark Trade noted that Eubank relied upon the iron in both his chin and his ambition to stop Ben in a bout which resembled a street fight for the 9 rounds it lasted. He certainly withstood barrages, notably against Ben and Michael Watson, but he wasn't immune to hitting the canvas. Similarly, fighters like Carl Froch and Gavin Rees have also displayed solid durability, yet there's historically been a stigma surrounding Britain's resilience. Throughout the 20th century, American journalists and promoters described those who box north of 200 pounds from the UK as horizontal heavyweights, insinuating that they were fat and lacked a good chin. I feel this is a bit harsh, with fighters like Don Cockle, Joe Bugner and Frank Bruno absorbing significant punishment without folding. Critics will certainly point to both Amir Khan and David Price as specific examples of glass chins, but this represents the extreme end of the spectrum, I feel. In terms of the average, I'd equate British chins more to fighters like Lennox Lewis and Tyson Fury. They can shoulder some tough shots, but are far from being invincible. Hence, I'd say the British sit around the 6 out of 10 on the scale. Okay, but not brilliant. As America has produced the largest quantity of high-level pugilists, it's difficult to fully paint them with the same brush. There's obvious variety. Reading AJ Liebling's The Sweet Science, he recounts the brutal first clash between Ezard Charles and Rocky Marciano, stating Charles's face, rather narrow with a high curved nose, changed in shape to a squatty rectangle as he watched. It was as though he had run into a nest of wild bees, yet he refused to go down. Throughout the book, Liebling elaborates on the exceptional chins of fighters like Sugar Ray Robinson and Marciano, and I feel old school American boxers did overwhelmingly adhere to this trend. There were outliers like Floyd Patterson, Tommy Hearns and Tommy Morrison, but the roster still displayed durability, especially in Oliver McCool, Marvin Hagler and Jake LaMotta. But fast forward to modern day, and I feel the aura has slipped slightly. Aside from Terence Crawford and Gervonta Davis, the lineup has shown weakness at times, with Teofimo Lopez, Ryan Garcia and Caleb Plant not being infallible to hard shots to the jaw. Jared Anderson's decimation at the hands of Bakole is a further microcosm of this general decline. So, although the Americans have generally had strong chins, I feel recent times has dragged the number down to a 7 out of 10. The Filipino Pancho Villa fought 104 contests in the ultra-competitive 1920s and was never knocked down. He evidently had an exceptional chin and correctly features in many top 10 best chin lists, but this trait hasn't always been evident. The Filipino Jun Tan Sato won in an upset victory for the Japan title in March 1994, with Katsumi Sato, owner of World Hitachi Gym, recalling, "At first he was so weak. He had a glass jaw, so a single hit could easily make him go down." The article would later insinuate that many Filipino fighters would easily fall down to the canvas with a single clean hit. But this is not a fair indication, as many of these boxers were brought in to throw their fights against Japanese opponents. Perhaps a more accurate embodiment would be Pacquiao, who, throughout his own book, declares how he'd easily shake off hard punches which hit him square on the jaw from larger opponents like Miguel Cotto and Shane Mosley. Nonetheless, the consensus seems to be that he has a good/granite chin, probably deeming the knockout at the hands of Marquez as a chink in the armour. Although he was admittedly depleted, he was certainly out cold. Regardless, Nonito Donaire and Charlie Suarez also boast good chins, which overall bolsters my ranking to 7 out of 10 for the Philippines. Finally, Japan. In the anime Hajime no Ippo, Sendo Takeshi is renowned for his incredibly durable chin, often described as having an iron quality. But does this reflect Japan's actual boxers? Well, going back to the 60s, Fighting Harada embodied the granite chin ethos, walking through punches against dangerous opponents like Brazil's Eder Joffre. Conversely, the 1990s saw Japanese pugilists like Hiroshi Kawashima suffer from a weaker chin, recording 2 knockout losses early doors. Through further research of fighters like Katsuya Onizuka and later Hozumi Hasegawa, I've noticed there is some vulnerability to harder shots, but it seems to be the heart and spirit of Japan's fighters which guides them through the pain of being buzzed, as opposed to the actual strength of the chin. I feel Inoue is a great example of this. He's been dropped twice in his career, yet shown incredible powers of recovery and a willingness to continue to fight close combat. So I'd therefore award Japan an 8 out of 10. And there you have it, my general ratings of the strength of boxers' chins in each country. Mexico takes it with a 9 out of 10 ranking, though their prevalence at the lower weights could help them in this department. I really seem to glaze Mexico every time I make these sorts of videos. Anyway, I know this video is very much based on generalizations, so I'd like to now hear what you guys think. Which nation produces the fighters with the greatest resilience? I'm very keen to hear your thoughts down below. Also, if you do want to see a second part of this series in which I cover more countries, please let me know by leaving a like and subscribing. It really does mean the most. More content is on its way, so keep an eye out. See you soon. Cheers.